by my curse. Thy part in this shall not be forgiven. May the curse seep to thy very soul. Tarnished, thou art but a fool. The earth tree wards off all who dare approach. We are all forsaken.
Morgott's Curved Sword. A unique sword, that's the sword of Morgott. It's a sword that's being imbued with all the cursed blood of Morgott, because Morgott is being cursed by one of the outer god, the formless mother. And he's very ashamed because some people are being born as omen with the cursed blood also, and he's ashamed of being part of this cursed species, if we could say, because he really admired the Earth Tree and the Golden Order, and he wanted to walk into the footsteps of his mother and father. And he's just, feeling ashamed of being what he is, so he put all of his cursed blood in his sword. So that's the sword that we are using today. And the sword we are using today is a great curved sword, and it's one of the better curved great sword. Basically, another great one is the very famous Bloodhound thing. And this one is quite similar to the Bloodhound thing. The question is going to be, is Morgott curved sword worth using? And should you use it? So basically, first of all, let's talk about the stat. You need 35 dexterity and 17 arcane in order to use it. With that being said, it's a very, very bad mix. Some weapons like that in Elden Ring and in Dark Souls 3 also, they just have some weird stat split, because basically they require you to have a lot of quite a bunch of dex, but they require you also to have some of another build. So basically what that forces you to do is to have a arcane / dexterity build. But if you have a pure arcane build, you can go just to 20 dexterity, and then you can use a bunch of very, very good arcane weapon, any katana like Nagikaba blood infuses with spinning slash. You can use cross naginata. You can use the curved scavenger sword. You can use the bloody Ellis. You can use Eleanora's pole blade. There's a bunch of weapons that requires a minimum amount of strength and dexterity and a bunch of arcane, but this one is so weird because it requires you to have 35 dexterity and also 17 arcane. So it doesn't really fit on a pure dexterity build, and it doesn't really fit on an arcane build. So what you need to do is basically meet the minimum requirement for dexterity and then put some in arcane. But the problem is also that this weapon scales mostly with dexterity, so if you do invest more into arcane, you're not going to gain much out of it. And also the blood buildup on the sword is not that great. You need to hit people a bunch of time if you want to make them bleed out. But if your goal is to bleed people out, you're gonna have so much more success while using the scavenger sword, Nagikaba, just cross naginata. All the weapons I've talked about before are way better in order to bleed someone out. With that being said, you have the Ash of War. The Ash of War is scaling with arcane, and also the Ash of War is really good. The Ash of War on this weapon is really good in combo. It's in two parts. You have one first spinning slash, then another spinning slash. Those two attacks have a lot of AoE effects. So you have one slash, then one AoE explosion, then another slash, then another AoE explosion. Those explosions go about 360 degrees around you. So if you're facing multiple people, they're a great tool, very similar to what Flaming Strike is, although we could argue that Flaming Strike is a bit better, but actually maybe not, because what's good about the curved sword is that you do move forward, you do use ping animation, and that creates this kind of bubble around you that protects you and is able to, push back a lot of the enemies if you're being surrounded by multiple people. So the Ash of War is very, very, very good on this weapon. The downside of this weapon, I would say, is its low damage. The damage is not too good. If you want to do a lot of damage with the Curved Greatsword, you have the Bloodhound Fang, which does beautiful damage, especially the first part of the Ash of War does a lot of damage. But this one, it's not too great. It's great on I think how I made it work is by having the minimum requirement of 30 dexterity, and then I'm using Millicent Prosthesis in order to have 5 extra dexterity, and then I put all my point into Arcane so that I can use also other weapon. But the problem is that you have low bleed, low damage. It's a bit hard to proc bleed, especially if people are dodging, your Ash of War. However, the Ash of War is also very, very good at roll catching people if you're close to someone and you have the advantage. For example, you just landed an R1 on them and you use the Ash of War, you will more likely roll catch them. And if you roll catch them with the first swing, the first 360 attack, you're going to do another one that's going to combo. So you can actually dash out a lot of damage. So the sword doesn't do too much damage by itself, but it does a lot of damage in combination with the Ash of War, and if you have quite a bit of Arcane. With that being said, the very big problem of this weapon is that it's a Curved Greatsword, and the Curved Greatsword has a very, very terrible moveset. The main problem, like many weapons, is that it doesn't have access to a poke attack. A poking attack is very, very good because it's not telegraphic. It comes out quite fast and it's not too telegraphic. Any swipe attack has a very telegraphic, pre-charge when someone is going for a swipe attack, whether it's on the Greatsword, a Curved Greatsword, Ultra, etc. Any weapon that has swipe attack, those attacks are very dodgeable because you can see them from a mile away. But when you have weapon that can do both, like halberd, like spears, like claymore to some extent, those weapons are very good because you can do swipe attack, but you can also mix it up with poking attack. And the Curved Greatsword only has access to swing attack, and the swings are very, very slow. So if you meet any competent reactive player, there's virtually, you can do stuff, you can kind of trap them and trying to mix it up. What I did a lot was using the backstep technique, backstep into R1. But every time I was facing someone that has a fast booking weapon, whether it's an S-Dog, whether it's a halberd or a heavy thrusting sword, well, they were just able to dodge most, if not all, of my attack. So if you're only going to use the sword, I don't think it's too great. And if we are looking at the tournament scene, no one is using a Curved Greatsword, right? It's being run by Uggs, so Ultra, Colossal Weapon, Halberd, S-Dog, and Moonveil. And also Double Straight Sword is a big meta option at the moment. So yeah, Curved Greatsword are not too meta. However, I do believe that, learning to play with the Ash of War and maybe hard swapping to Morgott Curved Greatsword in order to use it, as a let go of me type of attack, or really rushing down your enemy when they don't expect it, or dealing with a crowd of multiple people, well, it's very good. So yeah, this is basically my review on this weapon. The pros, to summarize, is they do the Ash of War. The Ash of War is really the pro of this weapon. Beautiful Ash of War, tons of roll catching potential, proc bleeds if you're able to dash combo the two part of the Ash of War. The big cons is that the build, there's too much requirement for the build, especially if you do a low level character. So if you stay around level 50, it's virtually almost impossible to make it work on a level 50. But you can, if you stack up a lot of talisman, then you don't have access to empty talisman slot to be able to react if you're facing someone, using bleed or sleep or getting some health or whatever. And so you need to go high level in order to make it work. And even when you go high level, it's not that too efficient. So yeah, that was it guys for my review on the Morgott Curved Greatsword. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe and comments. I love you guys. I'm Valentin and I see you in the next video. Bye bye.